Hey, what's going on, guys? JMac here. So today we're going to showcase a Summoner Templar build using Mirror Arrow and Blink Arrow, two abilities that just came out with the most recent patch 1.3. So we've got Blink Arrow. It reads, fires an arrow at the target destination. When the arrow lands, you are teleported to it and a clone is summoned at your old location. The clone is a minion that uses your bow and quiver. And then Mirror Arrow is similar. Fires an arrow at the target destination. When the arrow lands, a clone is summoned, and the clone is a minion that uses your bow and quiver. Now, normally these two abilities have a cooldown, which limits the amount of minions you'd be able to get out from the ability. What we're going to do to bypass that is link it to Trap. So this allows us to throw a trap on the ground, and when an enemy walks over the trap, it'll spring and then cast the ability. And then also linked to multiple traps, we then throw 3 traps at a time, which means, you know, if those 3 traps are walked over, each cast we're getting 3 minions out of it. So this allows us to get a ton of minions out, and then from there we can buff our minions with other abilities and things like that. We're also going to run lesser multiple projectiles. This will allow our minions to cast, to shoot 3 arrows, opposed to just 1, which is really important, especially early on, so that you don't get swarmed. It's possible late game, if your gear is really good and your damage is through the roof, you don't need it as much because you're going to be just killing so quickly. But early on, especially, I think LMP or greater multiple projectiles is really important. I'd definitely recommend running it. Then we're also down here, we're running Deerstalker, which gives us a level 11 trap linked just from the boots itself, which gives us a 5 link. So we're going to run Mirror Arrow, multiple traps, LMP, and the trap from Deerstalker. Then we have that 5th socket. We're going to run minion damage for now. I think this is a really good option. Your other options being probably something like increased duration is very good, although we are getting a lot of increased duration from the tree. And then another option is possibly weapon elemental damage, especially if you're to the point where you're running both Anger and Wrath. That's a really good option. Pierce is another option potentially, although there's a chance you're going to be running the Infractum bow, which makes Pierce useless. So it just kind of depends. There's definitely a few options with that 5th slot, and 6th potentially if you have 6 links. Let's go over what other abilities we're going to run to buff our minions. So we're going to run Flesh Offering, which basically you consume nearby corpses to give your minions an attack speed buff. This is a huge damage buff, and probably the first one you're going to run early on to just clear really quick. You can definitely level with this build. I normally level up to around 30-ish or so and then switch over to it, and I always run Flesh Offering early just because it's low on mana, and it's beast. It's really good. We're going to run Projectile Weakness. Again, just a huge damage increase. Also gives us extra knockback, and if you're not running an Infractum bow, gives you a Pierce chance as well. Really good. Most of the time, especially when I'm mapping at the moment, I don't normally cast this until I get to a rare mob or magic monsters or something like that, or the boss. For the most part, on just regular normal monsters, you really don't need to worry about it. You're going to kill them so quickly, you don't really need it. Most of the time, I just throw 4 to 6 traps and then hit my Flesh Offering, and that about takes care of it. So we got those. Then we're also going to be running Convocation. Recalls all minions that are following you to your location and grants them a temporary life regen effect. Life regen isn't very relevant, but being able to move your minions around at will is really good, especially with the bow that we're currently running, which we'll go over the gear here in just a minute. But this definitely helps you to maximize your damage, and a lot of times, you know, your minions will be all over the place. Getting them into one central location is very good, and you know, you can kind of, like, say there's a rare monster but they're attacking all these white mobs, you can move over to the rare monster, Convocation, and then put them all right next to it, kill it really quickly that way. So that's really good. And then we're also going to run a extra Blink Arrow for movement with faster attacks. Basically just our movement spell. The issue is we can't really run Lightning Warp because we have so much increased duration on the tree. it makes Lightning Warp really, really slow, unfortunately. It kind of works against it. So we're going to run a Blink Arrow, which isn't quite as good. It has a cooldown to it, but it's still fine. It works just fine. It also gives us extra minions too. So there will be times where I've already cursed everything, and everything already has the attack speed buff from Flesh Offering, and I don't have any traps to lay, that I might just Blink Arrow just to get an extra minion out there to attack things. And it's pretty decent to get a reliable minion out against single targets as well. The one issue this build sometimes has is you get to a point where you don't have that many minions out and there's only 1 or 2 stragglers left, and potentially if you don't throw your traps correctly, you can have an issue cleaning up. So that's pretty good there. Alright, so the one aura we're currently running is Anger. Now, it may be correct to run Wrath early on instead, I'm not sure, but ideally I want to run both. Now it's going to be a little ways away because my mana just can't quite support it just yet. But if you were able to run both, it'd be a huge damage buff to your minions. So we're going to run this linked with Generosity because you're not doing any damage yourself. So this gives you way more damage output out of the aura for your minions. And then also linked with a reduced mana to have less mana reserved from the aura. Currently with the tree and that reduced mana, it's only 34% mana reserved. So I'm relatively close to being able to run another aura. I may have to run an Alpha's Howl to do it. It just kind of depends. We'll have to see how it goes. There are times where if I run both, it's totally fine, and then other times I won't have mana to throw traps, which is obviously an issue. So as far as gearing goes, I'm pretty sure that in-game a Drill Neck Quiver is going to be best in slot. Basically, you get damage based on your Pierce chance up to 100%. So if you have the gear that you have 2 6 links, so you can 6 link your Blink Arrow and your Mirror Arrow, and you can put a Pierce gem in there linked with those, then go for it. But the more budget way to do it is probably just going to be to run an Infractum bow, which basically is going to allow your minions to have a 100% chance to pierce at all times, which will give you a huge damage buff from the Drill Neck. That'll be the easiest way to do it and the most cost efficient. Now, you know, at the end of the leagues, or if you're playing in Standard and you have a ton of currency or whatever, you already have 6-link bow and chest, then you can probably ditch the Infractum for some other kind of bow. But I think that's my plan. That's what I'm going to shoot for in the Bloodlines League here soon. Now, currently, what I'm running is a Chin Soul. Now, 100% more bow damage at close range, and then bow knockback at close range. So when you throw the traps, the minions always spawn right next to the monsters, which has a ton of synergy with this bow. I mean, they pretty much always are getting that damage buff when they first spawn, which is awesome. And then another really nice synergistic thing is this bow with Convocation. You can, you know, just put the minions where you want them. So you can run up right next to a boss, Convocation, and then put them right there, and then they get that extra damage bonus from the bow, which is pretty cool. Another option too is you could even run Point Blank in here somewhere. I think there's some people maybe running like Ranger builds, going down into Point Blank that way, or just linking it with your Mirror Arrow and your Blink Arrow. So it's up to you. You can try that out and see if you like it. I would probably recommend against it just because there is a relatively decent amount of damage that is done at long range, and this Chin Soul, it gives you extra damage at close range, but it doesn't take any damage away from you when you're at long range. So there are a couple other pieces of gear that have minion damage and things like that on them, but I'm not really going to worry too much about them right now. They are options in game if you do happen to find them, or you want to buy them. But the most important things, I think, are that you have a good quiver and a good bow because your minions run them, and then you obviously get all your links and your sockets and everything, and all the resists and HP that you need, especially if you are playing in Bloodlines. Alright, let's take a quick look at the tree, the passive tree. I'm going to post a link to the tree in the info section of this video, that way you guys can take a look at it yourselves, but we'll go over it real quick. So obviously you're starting in Templar. So you've got the mana regen and life nodes here, coming up this way to Sanctity, and then up here into these life nodes. I recommend getting those early. These right here, you probably don't need to get that early on, although you can if you want to. Basically, whenever you feel like you need the extra mana and mana reduction, go ahead and get them. Coming up this way to Retribution. Now most of the time I level with some kind of spell damage, so I like this node. And then also later on you still get Strength and Int and cast speed out of it for your traps. I think it's pretty decent. Alternatively, you can go down through this way and come around, but I like going up this way. This also gets you to 15% increased damage to your minions, which if you decide to level with minions, you're probably going to want to get this early on. At some point I will get this. Right now I'm not too worried about it, but if you decide to level with this build, go ahead and snag that early. So coming up this way, I'm going to get probably at least one of these dex nodes, just because starting in the Templar tree, you're not going to have a ton of dexterity, and you're going to need the dex to run bows. So you're probably going to need at least one of these nodes, which you can get this one here, and there's also another one down this way, or just one of them in like a jade amulet probably. So coming up this way, you get Minion Instability, which the clones actually have a ton of life, so this is a really good node. And against bosses that just one-shot them, you know, like the Act 2 boss that stomps them, it's really solid for finishing off bosses. Coming up over this way, you get these 3 minion nodes here. You get 15% and 10% damage, and then at some point you can get this 8% attack speed as well. And then coming down this way, there's some life, and then you're going to end over here, down right here, minion damage and Lord of the Dead, getting extra damage. You get 30% right there. So coming down this way, you've got some aura and reduced mana reservation nodes into sovereignty, which is a really sick one. Now, you don't necessarily need these early on, although even with just running one aura, I like to get this. It's pretty solid. It really makes it so you don't have any mana issues whatsoever. You can kind of cast projectile weakness and, you know, anything you want to all the time and not have any worries. But you can forego this until later on if you want to. But once you get to the point where you are running 2 auras, you're going to need these. Then you got some life and chaos nodes here. Coming down this way to more life nodes. And then I went up and got Faith and Steel. These two you can probably not get, but maybe early on get them and then possibly just refund them later, potentially. Depends on what you want to do. Then you're also going to come down this way. You've got some max life and mana regen and life regen nodes here that are really good. Coming down to some more minion damage. So you get 15% damage here, 12% attack speed, and then another 20% damage. Now again, if you decide to level as this build, what I would probably do is go through here, up this way, get this 15%, come down this way, and get all these next. And that should pretty much carry you through the early levels, and you'll be doing a ton of damage. Like I said, most of the time I level with some kind of spell damage personally, though. At least till like level 40-ish or so, then I swap over once I have the 4 links and all that good stuff. So coming down this way, you get Shaper, more mana regen and life regen. Down through here, this will be your first skill duration setup, which you're going to get 2 of these. This is really good. It allows your minions to stay out longer, which increases your damage, and it synergizes with convocation and things like that, and the buffs. So coming over here, there's the other expertise dexterity node if you want to get that, and then you've got max life and mana cost reduction nodes here that are really good. So then you're going to come down this way, get a bunch of life. You're going to get all of these at some point in time. It'll probably be later on though. Basically, if you're going into maps in hardcore and you're not at like 4K life, you probably want to get some of these, and get close to that 4K mark, if not higher, because you're really not running a ton of armor and stuff. So you're going to be running, armor flasks. You're going to want to run granite flasks, and you want to make sure you have a decent amount of life. That way you don't get one shot, obviously. Coming over here, you get the second skill duration setup. At this point, you're going to be basically where I'm at. That 5.70 seconds is how long these last, which is really sick. And then at this point, you're going to want to come over here. If you want to run 2 auras, you're going to need to get some more mana reservation nodes. And the way to do it pretty much is to come over this way. Basically because it's going to allow you to use 2 less points. You can come down through here. You get evasion and armor and all res, and then up through this way, but you're going to spend 2 more points to do it. And I think this is probably the better option. This evasion is kind of meh, but you can get 4% reduced mana right there, and then you get cast speed and move speed there, coming down through this way, and then you get all of these right here, which are really good. And then from there, if you still have the points, you can come up this way and get some more life, or potentially there's some trap stuff right here. It just kind of depends on what you want to do. That's the setup that I have currently. Again, you know, you can just forego all of this over here if you want to, and just strictly go for all the minion damage. Just run the one aura, you know, just run anger or just run wrath, and you know, come down here, get all this minion damage, get this attack speed here, get this 15% here, and not even worry about it. But I do think that the ideal best setup is going to be 2 auras. It may end up being that you have to run an Alpha's Howl to do so. I just haven't had a chance to test quite enough at in-game to know for sure just yet, but it is a possibility. Alright guys, so we're just going to run a quick level 66 map just to show the build off real quick and show you how it functions actually playing it in the game. I'm going to turn my mic off for the gameplay portion of the video, so thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoy it.